Let's give the floor to Fadimatou Noutchemo. Hello. You spoke earlier at the Youth Roundtable. You are the president of the Young African Travelers Associations, and you're very much committed to African economic development. You said that the air industry is essential for African economic development. Some countries have made headway in Africa. You have some airports using solar energy and environmentally friendly airports. Can you give us a few other examples? Well, thank you, Sophie. And this is my second appearance on this symposium. Africa very much needs the air industry. If you look if you look at Africa between 1963 and 2063, we can see that air transport has made all the difference. And in Africa alone, in 2021, the free trade area in Africa is such that for anything to happen, you will need to grow the air industry sector, which is lagging behind. Prior to the COVID crisis, the world was gathering around Africa to define new relations with Africa. Of course, capital expenditure for air infrastructure is such that governments find it very difficult to provide the investment. But instead of building roads and railways, air links are really the way out. AXA in Africa has made major headway because, of course, in South Africa, you have much more air activity than, say, Cameroon. But new technologies are coming in. Dutch Garden International Airport has actually gone solar, and so with a view to protecting the environment, we have solar power in the Kinshasa International Airport as well. You have a number of environment protection measures that were taken, including noise abatement and but also air pollution abatement. And Douala Airport in Cameroon has just inaugurated its new solar panels to electrify the airport. And there are many more projects around the African continent. So we're well aware of the need that, as we said earlier, aviation is a major industry, and it has to be there along other industries, but we have to speak with one voice to provide Africa's technological transition, but also its ecological transition, so as to arrive at the best possible level.
So my next question would be about whether you think that there are forms of cooperation between different African states in this area. There are indeed some areas of cooperation between African countries. There are exchanges of professionals for training to share experience from the field, for example. And we could say that the ACI, the AFRA, and other organizations working with the African Union have been able to strengthen cooperation over the past few years. There are also other entities like the Training Institute Federation that have been able to boost such exchanges to work together to harmonize development of aviation. Of course, Africa is a very large number of countries, as I mentioned yesterday, with 5 broad regions. Perhaps I can briefly recall that for those who were not with us yesterday. We need to keep in mind the fact that Northern Africa, Southern Africa, and also the English-speaking parts of Western Africa are more developed in that realm. In particular, when it comes to some of the connections between cities, the traffic is almost as intense in Europe. And with the exception perhaps of Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire, which are making huge efforts, we can see that there is a lot to be done still. We could mention the case of Ethiopia as an example, which is a hub, but in Central Africa, where you have immense forested regions which could contribute to the health of the environment, they do not contribute greatly to damaging the climate through aviation. And under the aegis of the African Union, there are a number of people working. There are also many volunteers like myself trying to advocate among younger people to understand better the importance of aviation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Fadi. I just wanted to say that Africa only stands for, was it 3% of the overall volume of traffic? So there's tremendous potential for growth there. People often say Africa is the future of aviation and will no doubt be growing 4 times as fast in those terms. How do you see the future there, Fadi? Well, perhaps I could reformulate that. Africa is not the future, but rather the present of aviation. Before the COVID crisis, we were thinking about the future market. But the reality today is that when you look at developed countries, there are a lot of airlines that were doing fine and that have ground to a halt. What I would say to these airlines is that, or companies in general, is that if in Europe, Asia, North America, there is no buoyancy for flights, there is a tremendous potential in Africa, a lot of potential demand. And so if there ever was a time to seek cooperation with African countries, this is it. We have to recognize the pandemic has not had the same effect broadly across Africa as it has elsewhere. There are still people traveling around with these new free trade areas which enable goods, because I tend to look at air cargo for my part a lot. If we look at air cargo connections and how they contribute to connectivity across the continent, it's a very modest proportion. So why not develop that new air cargo market, which would be very much in step with our current continental level policies? Even if we do call on external technologies, we still have the ability to ensure that we have the infrastructure to make such goods transport possible across the continent. Well, it stems clearly from what you've been saying, Fadi. There's a need for aviation to contribute to Africa's development. Why did you take it upon yourself within the African Aviation Professionals Association to work towards this end? What kind of response are you getting from young Africans? Well, I should start with my own example. I started working in 2010 at the Cameroon Airlines Corporation, but prior to that, I had never even considered working in the field of aviation. And when I see the number of young Africans who think they should emigrate to Europe or other developed parts of the world, it makes me feel that I should tap into my own experience to try to shift this thinking. There are huge possibilities that stem from aviation. If we look at the major airports and the connections between elements of infrastructure, it's largely about information technology as well. And if we're able to develop all of this in Africa, that will provide considerable job opportunities. And for young people who are in rural areas or from disadvantaged families, there is great potential there. If you think about people who live in a rural context, farmers ultimately just want to be able to sell their produce so they can send their kids to school. And if you look at the fact that some 60% of the population in Africa is below the age of 25, this led me, based on my own personal experience and looking at the difficulties we're encountering, to think that we needed to highlight how important this industry can be so that we can encourage young people to take advantage of this and fulfill themselves while being useful to their countries. And I'm very happy to say that the uptake has been quite strong among young Africans. Many who have an interest in new technologies have an interest in contributing to aviation. There are also a lot of young people who are able to go beyond what they had worked with before, and using digital tools in particular, who want to be able to link and connect with young people in other parts of the world.